Bagged salad looks simple, but the journey from field to that sealed plastic container is longer and more industrial than most people realize. It starts on large commercial farms, where lettuce and other greens are harvested by machine or by hand, often within hours of being packed. From there, the produce is trucked to a processing facility, and this is where the real transformation begins. The greens are dumped into massive tanks of chilled water mixed with a sanitizing solution, usually a diluted chlorine-based wash, similar in concept to what keeps a swimming pool clean. This step isn't optional. Because the leaves come from open fields exposed to soil, insects, irrigation water, and wildlife, this wash is what removes surface dirt and reduces the microbial load before packaging. It doesn't sterilize the produce completely, but it's a critical safety step in an industry that has, in the past, dealt with serious outbreaks tied to contaminated greens. After the wash, the salad is spun dry using industrial centrifuges, similar to an oversized salad spinner you might have in your kitchen, only running continuously at high volume. Then it moves onto a packaging line where it's weighed, bagged, and sealed, often with a gas mixture injected into the bag to extend shelf life. This modified atmosphere is why bagged salad can survive a week or more without wilting, even though the leaves were technically cut and processed days before you bought them. Refrigeration throughout this entire chain is non-negotiable. Any break in the cold chain, whether during transport, storage, or sitting out too long on a store shelf, gives bacteria a chance to multiply. That's part of why food safety experts still recommend rinsing bagged salad at home, even when the label says pre-washed, because an extra rinse can remove any residual bacteria and reduce risk, even if it won't guarantee complete safety. The bigger issue isn't necessarily the chlorine wash itself, but the fact that cut, exposed leaf surfaces create more opportunities for bacteria like E. coli or Listeria to take hold compared to a whole, unprocessed head of lettuce. Once greens are shredded or chopped, that increases surface area and juice exposure, which is exactly the kind of environment bacteria thrive in. This is why bagged salad recalls tend to make headlines more often than recalls of whole vegetables. None of this means bagged salad is inherently dangerous to eat. Millions of bags are consumed safely every single day, but understanding the process, the industrial washing, the gas-sealed packaging, and the dependence on an unbroken cold chain helps explain why food safety agencies continue to recommend rinsing your greens, checking expiration dates carefully, and paying attention to any product recalls before you toss that bag straight into your salad bowl. Let's go deeper into why this process exists the way it does, because the story of bagged salad is really the story of an entire industry trying to solve a problem that didn't exist a few generations ago. Before pre-cut greens became a grocery store staple, people bought whole heads of lettuce, brought them home, washed them themselves, and used them within a day or two. There was no multi-day gap between harvest and consumption, no industrial wash step, and no need for a modified atmosphere inside a sealed bag. The entire bagged salad industry was built around convenience, and convenience comes with trade-offs that most shoppers never think about while tossing a bag into their cart. One of the most overlooked parts of this process is just how much handling actually happens before that bag reaches the shelf. Depending on the facility, greens can pass through multiple conveyor systems, sorting stations, and inspection points where workers or machines remove damaged leaves, foreign debris, or discoloration. Optical sorting technology in some large facilities can scan thousands of pounds of greens per hour, flagging anything that doesn't meet size or color specifications. It sounds high-tech, and in many ways it is, but it also means the leaves are exposed to a lot of surfaces, equipment, and air during processing, any one of which could introduce contamination if sanitation protocols aren't followed precisely. This is why facility hygiene matters just as much as the produce wash itself. Processing plants are required to follow strict sanitation schedules, which include regularly disinfecting conveyor belts, blades, tanks, and packaging equipment. But because these facilities often run continuously to keep up with national demand, any lapse, whether it's a piece of equipment not cleaned thoroughly between shifts or contaminated water recirculated through the wash tanks, can affect an enormous volume of product before anyone notices a problem. That's part of why a single contamination event can lead to recalls covering millions of bags across multiple states, even if only a small portion of the harvest was actually affected. Water quality itself deserves more attention than it usually gets. The wash tanks rely on chlorine or other sanitizers to keep bacteria from spreading from leaf to leaf, but that only works if the concentration is properly maintained and monitored throughout the day. As organic material builds up in the water from thousands of pounds of leaves passing through, the sanitizer can become less effective if it's not replenished or filtered correctly. In other words, the wash step isn't a one-time magic fix. It's a continuously managed system that depends on consistent oversight, working equipment, and trained staff catching problems before they escalate. Transportation adds another layer of vulnerability. After processing, bagged salad has to travel from the facility to distribution centers and then to individual stores, often crossing several states in refrigerated trucks. Even a short delay at a loading dock on a hot day, or a malfunctioning refrigeration unit, can allow the internal temperature of the product to creep upward. Bacteria don't need much time to start multiplying once temperatures rise, and because these greens are already cut and bagged, there's no way for the consumer to visually detect early bacterial growth. This is very different from something like a whole cucumber or a bag of unwashed carrots, where the outer skin acts as a natural barrier against contamination. It's also worth understanding why leafy greens specifically tend to show up in food safety headlines more than other produce categories. Spinach, romaine, and mixed greens have wide, thin leaf surfaces with a lot of nooks, ridges, and crevices where bacteria can hide, especially once they've been chopped. Compare that to something like a bell pepper or an apple, which has a smooth, mostly closed surface until it's cut. Leafy greens are essentially all surface area, and once they're shredded into smaller pieces for packaging, that surface area multiplies even further, creating countless microscopic hiding spots that a simple rinse at home may not fully reach. Then there's the matter of how these greens are grown in the first place. Large-scale lettuce and spinach farming often takes place near other agricultural operations, including livestock farms, which has historically been linked to contamination events involving irrigation water. If runoff from a nearby cattle operation makes its way into an irrigation canal and that water touches the crops before harvest, it can introduce pathogens long before the greens ever reach a processing facility. This is one of the reasons food safety investigators trace outbreaks not just to the bagging plant, but sometimes all the way back to a specific field, a specific water source, or even a specific irrigation event on a specific date. Regulatory agencies have tried to address this by tightening water testing requirements and mandating buffer zones between produce fields and animal operations. But enforcement varies. And agriculture is a massive, spread-out industry that's difficult to monitor perfectly at every single farm. Some larger producers have invested heavily in water testing, traceability systems, and blockchain-based tracking that allows a bag of salad to be traced back to the exact field and harvest date within seconds. Smaller producers may not have the same resources, which creates inconsistency across the industry, even though the bagged salad on a shelf all looks equally clean and uniform to the average shopper. It's also worth mentioning the psychological effect of packaging itself. A sealed, brightly labeled bag that says triple washed or ready to eat creates a strong impression of safety and convenience, and understandably so, since that's exactly what these products are marketed to represent. But food safety experts have pointed out that this labeling can sometimes create a false sense of security, leading people to skip rinsing altogether because they assume the job is already done. Even when a wash step has occurred at the facility, home food safety guidance still generally recommends an additional rinse, not because the product is necessarily unsafe, but because an extra precaution costs almost nothing and can meaningfully reduce risk, especially for people with weaker immune systems like young children, elderly individuals, or those who are immunocompromised. Shelf life is another piece of the puzzle that ties directly back to that gas-flushed packaging mentioned earlier. The modified atmosphere inside the bag, typically a careful balance of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen, is designed to slow down the natural respiration process of the leaves, which is what causes wilting, browning, and spoilage. This is a delicate balance, though, because while it keeps the greens looking fresh longer, it doesn't necessarily stop bacterial growth at the same rate. In some cases, a bag of salad can look completely fresh and appealing while still harboring bacteria that wouldn't be visible until it's too late. This disconnect between visual freshness and actual safety is part of why relying on appearance alone isn't a reliable food safety strategy. Consumers can reduce their risk by paying close attention to a few practical habits. Checking the best by or use by date isn't just about taste. It's tied directly to the assumptions made about bacterial growth over time under proper refrigeration. Storing bagged salad at the coldest part of the refrigerator, rather than in the door where temperatures fluctuate more, can also help maintain that cold chain a little longer. And despite the pre-washed or triple-washed labeling, giving the greens one more rinse under cold, running water before eating adds a layer of protection that costs seconds, but can meaningfully lower risk. Ultimately, the story of bagged salad reflects a broader trend in the modern food system, where convenience and industrial efficiency have reshaped how food gets from the farm to the table. It's not inherently a dangerous product, and the vast majority of bags are consumed without any show whatsoever. But the process behind it is far more complex, mechanized and vulnerable to failure points than most people ever consider while grabbing a bag off the shelf. Understanding that complexity doesn't mean avoiding bagged salad altogether, but it does mean approaching it with a little more awareness, treating that ready-to-eat label as a helpful convenience rather than an absolute guarantee, and taking those extra small steps at home that can make a meaningful difference in keeping a quick, easy salad genuinely safe to eat.